The call came at 11:42 p.m. It was a sharp vibration on a phone that usually only hummed with business orders or death threats, but this ring felt different. It was from an unknown number, the high, trembling voice of a child. "He's beating my MaMa, please help." Derek, the Mafia boss who had ruled the streets with an iron fist for decades, stared at the glowing screen. He frowned, initially expecting a scam or a wrong number. Then the small voice whispered through the speaker again, shorter and shakier. "I'm hiding. He said he'll kill her." Derek's breath stilled. He had seen fear and he had caused it, but he had never heard a desperation quite like this. A child begging a stranger because she had no one else left. Without hesitation or a second thought, he spoke 4 words into the receiver. "I'm on my way." His men froze as he stood up, grabbed his coat and walked toward the door. "Boss, where are you going?" they asked, but he didn't answer. He didn't need to. Something in Jessica's words had hit a part of him he thought had died years ago. As his car tore through the silent streets, the engine roaring through the neighborhood, his pulse hammered against his ribs. Tonight he wasn't arriving as a Mafia boss. He was arriving as the only hope that little girl had left, and what he found inside that house changed everything. Stay with me until the end, because what Derek discovered in that living room will make your heart stop and start again, and don't forget to like this video. Hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Derek had built his empire on one simple principle: trust no one, love nothing, and feel nothing. For over 20 years, he had ruled the streets of Boston with an iron fist wrapped in expensive Italian leather. His name alone was enough to silence a room full of hardened criminals, a reputation carved from blood, betrayal, and the kind of calculated violence that kept weaker men awake at night. To the world, he was a man of marble and ice, a king who had convinced himself that caring was a luxury he could no longer afford. Inside his private office, surrounded by the smoke of expensive cigars and the heavy silence of power, Derek sat like a statue, staring at the phone that rarely rang with anything but news of profit margins or territory expansion. Then at 11:42 p.m. the silence shattered. The phone vibrated, a sharp, insistent rhythm that felt out of place in the stillness of the night. He picked it up, expecting a report from the docks or a warning about a rival's move, but the voice that filtered through the speaker was small, high, and trembling with a terror he hadn't heard in decades. "He's beating my MaMa," the child whispered, her breath hitching in a way that made Derek's chest tighten. "Please help." Derek stared at the unknown number, his brow furrowing as he tried to process the mistake. It was a wrong number, a glitch in the dark, but then a second plea came through, shorter and even shakier. "I'm hiding. He said he'll kill her." In that moment, the air in the office seemed to vanish. Derek had caused fear in many men, but he had never been the one a child begged for mercy when she had no one else left. Something fundamental shifted behind his ribs, a crack in the thick walls he had spent years constructing around his heart. Without a word to the lieutenants watching him, Derek stood up and grabbed his coat. "Boss, where are you going?" one of them asked, but Derek didn't answer. He didn't need to explain that a little girl named Jessica was reaching across the darkness of his isolation and reminding him of a promise he had made to a different girl a lifetime ago. As he walked out the door, his pulse began to hammer like a drum. Tonight, the business empire seemed less important than the 8-year-old girl waiting in the dark. He was no longer arriving as a Mafia boss, he was arriving as the only hope she had left. Derek's Mercedes tore through the empty streets of Boston like a bullet seeking its target. Red lights became mere suggestions. Stop signs disappeared into the night. His phone was pressed against his ear, Jessica's trembling voice the only thing that mattered in the entire world. "Jessica, I need you to stay with me, okay? Keep talking to me." "I'm scared," she whispered, her words barely audible over the sound of something crashing in the background. "He's yelling really loud. He's saying bad words." Derek's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. "I know you're scared, sweetheart, but I'm coming, I promise I'm coming." He swerved around a taxi, the driver's horn fadding behind him. "Tell me what happened, can you do that?" Jessica's breath hitched. Brown came home and he was acting funny. MaMa said he'd been drinking. They started fighting about money and bills and me. Her voice cracked. "He said I was the reason they couldn't afford anything, that I was just a burden since Daddy died." Derek's knuckles turned white against the steering wheel. "You're not a burden, Jessica, you hear me, you're not." Then MaMa told him to stop and he pushed her. She hit the table and there was so much blood. I tried to help her but Brown grabbed my arm really hard and told me to get to my room. So I ran and locked the door but another crash echoed through the phone. "He's trying to break it down. I can hear him kicking it." Where are you right now? Derek demanded, taking a corner so fast his tires squealed. In my closet behind my dresses, it's really dark. Good, that's good, stay there, stay quiet. Derek's mind raced faster than his car. Jessica, I need you to tell me, is your MaMa moving? Can you see her? I don't know, I ran to my room, I didn't see if she got up. Jessica's voice grew softer, more distant. I'm really sleepy, my head hurts. Every instinct Derek had developed over 20 years of reading danger signs screamed at him. The weakening voice, the confusion, the sleepiness, shock, maybe concussion if she'd been hit or thrown against something. No, Jessica, you need to stay awake for me, don't go to sleep. He pressed the accelerator harder, 5 minutes away, maybe 4 if he ignored every traffic law in existence. Tell me about your MaMa, what's she like? A small, tired laugh came through the phone. She's really nice. She works 2 jobs, one at the diner and one cleaning offices at night, but she always reads me stories before bed. We're reading Charlotte's Web right now. Yeah, what else? She makes the best pancakes on Sunday mornings, with chocolate chips shaped like smiley faces. Jessica's voice trembled. She says Daddy used to make them like that before the accident. I don't remember much about him. I was only 4. Derek's chest constricted. This child, this beautiful, innocent child who talked about pancakes and bedtime stories while hiding in a closet from a monster. She was exactly Sophia's age when the world had stolen her away. The same terror, the same helplessness, the same desperate hope that someone would come. Not this time, not tonight. With one hand, Derek pulled out his second phone and texted Marco, going dark. Emergency, don't follow. He wasn't coming to this apartment as Derek Castellano, feared crime lord of Boston. He was coming as Daniel Torres, the brother who had failed once and would walk through hell itself before failing again. Jessica, I'm 2 minutes away. 2 minutes. Can you hold on for 2 more minutes? Silence. Jessica. He broke the door, she whispered. He's in my room. Derek slammed the car into park outside the rundown apartment building in Dorchester, but his hands froze on the door handle. The building's flickering streetlight cast shadows that danced like ghosts, and suddenly he wasn't here anymore. He wasn't Derek Castellano, Boston's most feared crime lord. He was 17-year-old Daniel Torres, and the world was about to end. 20 years collapsed into nothing. Daniel, you need to come to Mass General right now. His boss's voice at the garage, grim and careful, the phone heavy in his grease-stained hands, his mother's name, his sister's name, words like incident and ambulance and hurry. Daniel had lived in a cramped South Boston apartment back then, 3rd floor walk-up with radiators that clanked in winter and windows that stuck in summer. His mother Rosa worked double shifts at a textile factory, her fingers permanently stained with dye. But they had each other. They had laughter. They had Sophia. Sophia with her curly light brown hair that bounced when she ran. Sophia with her endless questions about stars and oceans and why the sky changed colors. Sophia who believed with absolute certainty that her big brother Danny could fix anything, broken toys, scraped knees, monsters under the bed, bad dreams. Daniel had made her dinner every night while Rosa worked late, helped with multiplication tables at the kitchen table, tucked her into bed with stories about brave knights who saved princesses from towers. Will you always protect me, Danny? She'd asked one night, her small hand in his. Always soft, I promise, always. They were poor, but they were safe. Until Thursday evening when 3 men kicked in their door looking for money that didn't exist. Rosa had screamed at them to leave. Sophia had run to protect her mother, all 45 pounds of fierce little girl courage. One of the men had shoved her aside, just shoved her, not even hard, the police said later, just enough to get her out of the way. But Sophia had stumbled backward. Her head had struck the corner of the coffee table, the same table where Daniel had helped her with homework hours before. The sound had been soft, almost gentle, like a knock on a door. She'd crumpled to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Brain hemorrhage, the doctors explained later in that sterile hospital room with its fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. Subdural hematoma, severe cranial trauma, bleeding they couldn't stop, damage too extensive for her small body to survive. Daniel had run through streets that suddenly felt hostile and alien, past corners where he'd walked Sophia to school, past the bodega where she loved getting candy, past the park where she'd learned to pump her legs on the swings. He'd burst into the hospital to find Rosa with a bandage on her arm, eyes hollow with shock. And Sophia, tiny Sophia in a bed too big for her, machines beeping like countdown timers, tubes in her small arms. The doctors spoke in hushed professional tones about things he didn't understand, but he understood Sophia's hand in his. He understood the way her chest rose and fell, slower each time. He understood that he was watching the person he loved most in the world slip away, and there was nothing, nothing, he could do to stop it. Derek's phone buzzed in his lap, shocking him back to the present. Jessica's number, no voice, just ragged breathing and a man's voice in the background, slurred and angry. Then the line went dead. Derek's legs carried him toward the building entrance, but in his mind he was running through different streets. 20 years ago, running like his life depended on it, because Sophia's life did depend on it. He'd run through those South Boston streets with his lungs burning past familiar faces that blurred into nothing. Mrs. Chen at the corner store, Father Miguel locking up the church, the teenagers smoking by the basketball courts. None of them mattered, only Sophia mattered. At Mass General, he'd found his mother in the waiting room, a bandage wrapped around her forearm where one of the intruders had grabbed her. Rosa's eyes had been empty, hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made her whole. "She's in ICU," Rosa had whispered. They said we should prepare ourselves." The doctors had used careful, clinical words. Severe cranial trauma, intercranial pressure, incompatible with life. Daniel had nodded like he understood, but all he'd heard was "your sister is dying and you can't stop it." Sophia had looked so small in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and breathed for her. Her curly hair had been matted with dried blood someone had tried to wash out. An oxygen mask covered half her face. IV lines snaked from her tiny arms. Daniel had pulled a chair close and taken her hand, careful not to disturb the tubes. "Hey, Soph, it's Danny, I'm here now, I'm right here." For hours he'd sat there while doctors came and went with grave expressions, while Rosa prayed in Spanish, rocking back and forth, while machines monitored a life that was slipping away one heartbeat at a time. Then impossibly, Sophia's fingers had twitched in his. Her eyes had fluttered open, unfocused, confused, but open asterisk. "Danny," her voice had been barely a whisper, muffled by the oxygen mask. "I'm here, baby, I'm right here." Tears had streamed down his face, 17 years old and completely undone. "I'm scared," a single tear had rolled down her cheek. "I know, but you're going to be okay. The doctors are going to fix you up." Sophia had shaken her head slightly and somehow she'd known. Children always knew. "Danny, promise me something." "Anything, Soph, anything." "Promise me you'll help kids who are scared." Her breathing had grown more labored. "Like the kids at school who get bullied, like me when you're not home, promise you'll be there for them." "I promise, I swear to God I promise." He'd gripped her hand tighter, as if he could anchor her to life through sheer will. "Love you, Danny." "Love you too, Soph, so much." Her eyes had closed. The machines had started screaming. Nurses had flooded in, pushing Daniel back while they worked frantically over his sister's small body. Rosa had collapsed into his arms, both of them watching helplessly as doctors tried to restart a heart that had already decided to stop. Sophia had died 3 hours after midnight, 7 years old, 45 pounds, gone. After the funeral, something inside Daniel Torres had simply ceased to exist. The police never caught the intruders. They'd worn masks, left no prints, vanished like smoke. The system that was supposed to protect his family had failed completely. So Daniel had decided if he couldn't trust the system, he'd become his own system. Within 3 years, he was an enforcer for the Morty family. Within 7, a lieutenant. Within 15, he'd taken the name Derek Castellano and buried Daniel Torres in the same grave where Sophia lay. He'd buried the promise too. Until tonight. Derek yanked open the building's entrance door and started climbing. The stairwell reeked of stale cigarettes and mildew. Derek took the steps 3 at a time, his dress shoes echoing against concrete. First floor, second floor. On the 3rd floor landing he heard it, a man's voice, slurred and venomous, shouting obscenities through thin walls. Apartment 3, see the door hung crooked on its hinges, the lock mechanism shattered, barely held in place by a single bent screw. Fresh damage, recent. Derek pulled out his phone and hit Jessica's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then voicemail, her small voice recorded in happier times. "Hi, this is Jessica. Leave me a message and I'll call you back. Bye. His blood turned to ice. He pushed the door open. It swung inward with a soft creak that seemed deafening in the sudden silence. The apartment was a war zone. An overturned coffee table lay on its side, magazines scattered across the floor. A lamp had been smashed against the wall, its shade bent at an unnatural angle. Broken dishes created a minefield of ceramic shards near the kitchen entrance, and blood, dark droplets creating a trail across the worn carpet. Jennifer Martinez lay crumpled near the couch, one arm twisted beneath her body. Her dark hair was matted with blood that had pooled on the floor beneath her head. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but there, still alive. In the kitchen, backlit by the harsh fluorescent light above the sink, stood a man, tall, muscular, with short dark hair and a trimmed beard. Tattoos covered both arms. His knuckles were split and bleeding. He held a glass of water in one shaking hand, drinking like he'd just run a marathon. The man Brown spun around at the sound of Derek's entrance. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils dilated, drunk or high, maybe both. His shirt was torn at the collar, dark stains, blood or sweat spreading from his armpits. "Who the hell are you?" Brown's words slurred together, aggressive and territorial. Derek's voice came out flat, emotionless, colder than winter ocean water. "Where's the girl?" "Get out of my house." Brown set down the glass and started toward Derek, fists clenching. "This is none of your business. This is between me and my woman." "Last chance, where is she?" Brown charged, telegraphing his punch from a mile away. Right hook, sloppy, powered by rage and alcohol rather than skill. Derek sidestepped with minimal effort, caught Brown's arm mid-swing, and twisted it behind his back with surgical precision. The crack of tendons was audible. Brown's scream filled the apartment, primal and shocked. Derek used Brown's momentum to slam him face first against the kitchen wall. Dishes in the nearby cabinet rattled. Derek's forearm came up across Brown's throat, applying just enough pressure to make breathing difficult but not impossible. His other hand kept Brown's arm wrenched at an angle that sent white-hot pain shooting through his shoulder. "Let me be very clear," Derek said, his mouth inches from Brown's ear. "Jessica Martinez, 7 years old, curly light brown hair. She called me 20 minutes ago because you were beating her mother unconscious. Now her phone goes to voicemail and her mother is bleeding on your floor." Derek increased the pressure slightly. Brown gagged. "So I'm going to ask you one more time, and if I don't like your answer, you're going to discover exactly how many bones in the human arm can break before you pass out from shock. Where is she?" Brown gasped for air, his face pressed against the peeling wallpaper, fingernails scrabbling uselessly at Derek's forearm. Okay, Jesus Christ, man. "Talk." Derek eased the pressure just enough to let Brown breathe. "Jennifer's my girlfriend, all right. We had a fight, couples fight, it's normal." Brown's words came out in desperate bursts. "You don't understand what it's like living with that brat." Derek's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Let the monster talk. Monsters always talked. "That kid, Jessica, she's been disrespecting me ever since her dad died, acting like I'm not good enough to replace him, looking at me like I'm trash." Brown's voice took on a whining, self-pitying quality. "I'm trying to teach her some discipline, some respect, but Jennifer Barbies her, won't let me do what needs to be done." "Keep talking." Derek's voice was a whisper of steel. "Tonight at dinner I told Jessica to clear the table. Simple thing, right? But she talked back to me, said I wasn't her father and couldn't tell her what to do." Brown tried to shift his position, but Derek's grip was immovable. "I told her to shut her mouth to show some respect. That's when Jennifer got between us, started screaming at me about how I talk to her daughter." Derek increased the pressure slightly. Brown wheezed. "It was an accident, man, I swear. Jennifer was in my face, hitting me, scratching at my face like some crazy woman. I just pushed her away, just pushed her back. She slipped, hit her head on the table edge. I didn't mean for that to happen." "And Jessica..." The kid started screaming, saying she was gonna call the cops. "I couldn't let her do that. I got warrants, man, child support from my ex, some bullshit assault charge that was totally overblown. If cops showed up, I'd be back in county before morning." Brown's breathing was ragged now, panicked. "She ran to her room and locked the door. I was just trying to talk to her to make her understand she couldn't call the police. But she wouldn't listen. She never listens." With each pathetic excuse, each justification, each attempt to paint himself as the victim, Derek's grip tightened incrementally. His forearm pressed harder against Brown's throat. The arm twisted behind Brown's back rose higher, approaching the breaking point. So you kicked down a 7-year-old's door? I just wanted her to come out to talk to me. Brown's voice cracked with desperation and oxygen deprivation. She was being unreasonable. I was trying to teach her that actions have consequences, that you can't just. Where is she? Derek cut through the rambling excuses. She's probably still in her room. The lock's broken now. I was about to go get her when you showed up, I swear. I was just getting some water first, catching my breath. Derek's blood turned to ice. The lock was broken. Brown had been about to go get her. About to drag a terrified 7-year-old girl out of her hiding place. About to do God knows what to silence her, to punish her for daring to seek help. The timeline crashed over Derek like a physical blow. Jessica's phone going to voicemail. The door kicked in. Brown in the kitchen, drinking water, catching his breath before finishing what he'd started. Derek released Brown's arm and shoved him violently away. Brown stumbled, crashed against the refrigerator with enough force to rattle magnets and children's drawings that fluttered to the floor. A crayon drawing of a stick-figure family, mother, daughter, and a man who was definitely not Brown. Derek was already moving, rushing past the unconscious Jennifer, his heart hammering against his ribs. Down a short hallway, one door on the left bathroom, one door on the right bedroom. The bedroom door hung splintered and broken, kicked completely off its hinges. Jessica, Derek's voice cracked. Jessica, it's me, it's the man you called. Silence answered him. Terrible, suffocating silence. Derek stepped into the bedroom, his shoes crunching on splintered wood. A small bed with a purple comforter sat against one wall, stuffed animals arranged carefully on the pillow. Drawings covered the walls, crayon masterpieces of rainbows and flowers and stick-figure families. A backpack hung on a hook, decorated with sparkly unicorn patches. The room of a child who believed in magic and happy endings. Except the door lay in pieces on the floor, and that innocence had been shattered along with it. The closet door was cracked open just an inch. Derek could see darkness beyond and something else, the faintest tremor of movement. He lowered himself to his knees slowly, carefully, making himself smaller, less threatening. Jessica, it's me, the man you called, the one you talked to on the phone. Silence, but the kind of silence that held breath, held hope, held terror barely contained. You're safe now, sweetheart, I promise you're safe. A beat, too, then the closet door moved, opening another inch. In the darkness behind hanging dresses and a winter coat, 2 eyes reflected the dim light from the hallway. Wide eyes, terrified eyes. A little girl emerged slowly, like a wounded animal testing whether the predator had truly left. Curly light brown hair tangled and wild, a pink nightgown with cartoon characters on it, and a bruise blooming purple-black across her left cheek, the shape of adult fingers clearly visible. She was shaking, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Derek's heart didn't just break, it shattered into 1,000 pieces that cut him from the inside out. She looked exactly like Sophia, the same age, the same curly hair, the same fear written across every feature, the same desperate hope that someone, anyone, would make the monsters go away. 20 years collapsed into nothing, past and present merged. He was 17 again, sitting in a hospital room watching his sister slip away. He was 40, kneeling in a stranger's apartment, facing the ghost of every failure, every broken promise, every moment he'd convinced himself he couldn't save anyone. Is he gone? Jessica's voice was barely audible, small and broken. He can't hurt you anymore, Derek said, and the words were a vow, a promise carved from steel and blood and 2 decades of buried grief. I won't let him. Jessica stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for the lie, for the trick, for the betrayal that adults had taught her to expect. But whatever she saw there, perhaps the raw honesty of his pain, perhaps the fierce protectiveness blazing in his eyes, it was enough. She stumbled forward and threw her thin arms around Derek's neck, her small body racked with sobs that had been held in too long. You came. You really came. Derek caught her, held her, this stranger's child who weighed nothing and everything simultaneously. His arms came around her carefully, like she was made of glass, like she might disappear if he held too tight or not tight enough. The walls he'd built for 20 years, brick by brick, scar by scar, death by death, crumbled completely. He wasn't holding Jessica Martinez, he was holding Sophia Torres, he was holding every scared child he'd walked past in his rise to power. He was holding every victim he'd created in his quest to become someone the system couldn't touch. He was holding his humanity, and it was 7 years old and crying into his shoulder. "I'm here," Derek whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm here, sweetheart, I've got you, you're safe now." Jessica's fingers clutched the fabric of his jacket like a lifeline. "I was so scared, I thought he was going to." He's not going to do anything, I promise." Derek pulled back just enough to look at her face, at the bruise marring her cheek. Rage, pure and cold and absolute, flooded through him. "Did he hit you?" Jessica nodded, fresh tears spilling down her face. "And your MaMa?" She tried to stop him. She always tries to stop him. Jessica's voice broke. "Is she okay? There was so much blood." Derek's mind raced. Jennifer was unconscious but breathing. He needed medical help, but calling 911 meant police, questions, investigations. Brown would be arrested, but then what? How many times had he seen men like Brown get released, get bail, get second chances to finish what they started? "I'm going to make sure your MaMa gets help," Derek promised. "But first, I need you to stay right here while I make a phone call, okay?" "No," Jessica's grip tightened around his neck, panic flooding her features. "Don't leave me, please don't leave me alone." Derek looked into those terrified eyes and saw Sophia begging him to stay with her in the hospital. "Don't go, Danny, I'm scared." "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, I won't leave you, we'll go together." Derek carried Jessica back into the living room, her arms still locked around his neck, her face buried against his shoulder. He stepped carefully around the broken dishes, the overturned furniture, the blood, evidence of violence that would haunt this child for years. He settled her gently on the couch, the only piece of furniture still intact, and pulled out his phone. Jessica immediately grabbed his free hand, holding on like he might vanish if she let go. "I need to call a doctor for your MaMa," Derek said softly. "Someone who can help her." He dialed a number he'd used countless times over the years. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered, professional despite the late hour. "This is Dr. Okafor." "Sarah, it's Derek. I need you at an address in Dorchester. Head trauma, unconscious, female mid-30s. No police, no questions, cash payment." A pause. Dr. Sarah Okafor had been patching up Derek's people for 15 years. She'd learned not to ask what happened or why. "Text me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Derek sent the location and pocketed his phone. Jennifer's breathing was steady, a small mercy in this nightmare. He checked her pulse, elevated but strong. The bleeding from her head wound had slowed. She'd need stitches, probably a CT scan to check for internal bleeding, but she'd live. From the kitchen came a groaning sound. Brown had crawled to the corner near the refrigerator, clutching his ribs where Derek had thrown him. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Blood dripped from his split knuckles onto the linoleum floor. Derek stood slowly. Jessica's hand slipped from his and he saw the fear flash across her face. "I'll be right there," he told her, pointing to the kitchen. "I can see you the whole time." He walked toward Brown with the slow, measured pace of an executioner approaching the gallows, each footstep deliberate. Final. Brown's eyes widened as Derek reached inside his jacket and withdrew his weapon, a Glock 19, matte black, familiar as his own hand. "Please, man," Brown's voice came out high and panicked, all the earlier aggression evaporated. "I didn't mean for things to go this far. I was drunk. I made a mistake, please." "Shut your mouth." Derek's voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of a man who'd killed before and would kill again. He pressed the barrel of the gun against Brown's forehead, right between his eyes. Brown went rigid, his breath coming in short, hyperventilating gasps. A dark stain spread across the front of his jeans. Derek's finger moved to the trigger, applied pressure, not enough to fire, not yet, but close, so close. It would be so easy. One pull, 1 second. Brown would be gone and the world would be better for it. No trial where he'd get a plea deal. No bail where he'd come back to finish what he started. No second chance to hurt another woman, another child. The old Derek, the Derek who'd built an empire on decisive violence, would have pulled this trigger without hesitation, without remorse. Brown was a problem and problems got eliminated. Derek's finger tightened incrementally. "Mister," Jessica's small voice cut through the room like a knife. "Is my MaMa going to be okay?" Derek's hand froze. He turned his head slightly, gun still pressed to Brown's skull, and saw Jessica sitting on the couch. She was watching him with those wide, trusting eyes, eyes that saw a hero. Eyes that believed he was good, that he was safe, that he was someone who made things better instead of worse. She had no idea who he really was, what he'd done, the bodies he'd buried, the lives he'd destroyed. But she believed in him anyway. And somewhere, in heaven or memory or the space between heartbeats, Sophia was watching too, waiting to see if her big brother would finally keep his promise, not the promise to help scared children by eliminating their threats with bullets and blood. The promise to help them by being better than the monsters. Derek's chest constricted, the gun suddenly felt impossibly heavy in his hand. If he pulled this trigger, what would he teach Jessica? That violence solved problems, that strength meant killing, that the only way to stop bad men was to become one yourself. He'd spent 20 years proving that philosophy, 20 years becoming the very thing that had destroyed his family. Sophia's voice echoed in his memory, "Promise me you'll help kids who are scared." She hadn't said kill for them, she'd said help them. Derek's finger slowly eased off the trigger. Derek lowered the gun slowly, deliberately. The metal slid away from Brown's forehead, leaving a circular impression in the skin. Brown gasped, sucking in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. "Thank you, oh God, thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Derek's voice was like stone grinding against stone. "You have two choices, only two. Choose carefully because you won't get a third." Brown nodded frantically, tears and sweat mixing on his face. "Choice one, I pull this trigger right now. Quick, clean, you won't feel anything after the first second." Derek's eyes were dead calm, and that made the threat infinitely more terrifying than any rage could have. "Choice two, you walk out of this apartment, out of this building, out of this city. Tonight, right now, you never contact Jennifer Martinez again. You never speak Jessica's name again. You forget they exist entirely." Yes, I'll go, I swear to God I'll go." Derek's free hand shot out and grabbed Brown's face, fingers digging into his jaw, forcing eye contact. "I'm not finished. If I ever asterisk, and I mean ever asterisk, hear that you've laid hands on another woman or child, I won't give you choices anymore. There won't be a conversation, there won't be a warning." Derek leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I'll find you no matter where you run, no matter how far. And what I do to you will be so slow, so thorough, that you'll spend your last hours begging me to go back in time and pull this trigger tonight. Do we understand each other?" Brown's eyes were wide with primal terror, the kind of fear that rewires a person's brain. He nodded so hard his teeth clacked together. "Say it out loud." "I understand, I'll leave, I'll never come back. I'll never touch another woman or kid, I swear on my life." "You just did." Derek released Brown's face and stood, tucking the gun back into his jacket. "You have 5 minutes to get out of my sight, 4 minutes and 30 seconds to be out of this building. If you're still in Boston by sunrise, our conversation continues. Permanently." Brown scrambled to his feet, nearly falling twice. He grabbed his jacket from a hook by the door and stumbled out into the hallway, his footsteps thundering down the stairs like a stampede. Derek stood in the kitchen, breathing slowly, his hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, from restraint, from choosing the harder path. 15 minutes later, Dr. Sarah Okafor arrived with her medical bag and no questions. She was a small woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. She examined Jennifer, cleaned and sutured the head wound, checked her vitals. "Concussion moderate," Dr. Okafor said quietly. "She needs to be monitored tonight. No signs of skull fracture, but she should get a CT scan tomorrow to be safe. I'll leave instructions." "Thank you, Sarah." The girl, Dr. Okafor, glanced toward the couch where Jessica sat, watching everything with huge eyes. "Bruising, shock, trauma, but physically intact." Dr. Okafor nodded, packed her bag, and left as silently as she'd come. Derek paid her in cash as always. Derek returned to the couch and sat beside Jessica. She immediately moved closer, pressing against his side like she was afraid he might disappear. "Why did you let him go?" Jessica's voice was small, confused. Derek struggled to find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old. How could he explain that killing Brown would have been easier than letting him live, that mercy was harder than murder? "Because," he said slowly, "someone I loved very much once made me promise to help kids when they're scared. And I think she'd want me to teach you that being strong doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means choosing to be kind even when you don't want to, even when the other person doesn't deserve it." Jessica considered this seriously, the way children do when adults tell them something important. Who was she, the person who made you promise? My sister, her name was Sophia. Was she nice? She was the best person I ever knew. Derek's voice cracked despite his best efforts. Where is she now? The question hit him like a physical blow. She's in heaven, but I think she would have liked you very much. Jessica tilted her head, studying his face. Was she like me? Derek looked at this child, curly light brown hair, 7 years old, bruised but not broken, scared but still brave enough to ask questions. Yeah, he whispered, feeling tears threaten for the first time in 20 years. She was exactly like you. Jessica reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his scarred knuckles. The simple gesture of trust shattered something fundamental inside Derek's chest, something that had been frozen solid for 2 decades. I'm glad you kept your promise to her, Jessica said simply. And Derek realized, sitting in this broken apartment with this broken family, that maybe, just maybe, redemption wasn't impossible after all. Jessica Martinez stood in her new bedroom, sunlight streaming through clean windows that overlooked a tree-lined street where children played without fear. Astronaut posters covered the walls: Sally Ride, Me Jemison, Neil Armstrong, Dreams Made Visible. Her desk held neat stacks of library books about space exploration and marine biology. A telescope stood in the corner, a gift from Uncle Derek for her 8th birthday. The apartment in Dorchester was a memory now, replaced by this 2-bedroom in a neighborhood with good schools and neighbors who smiled and said hello. Jennifer had healed completely, the scar on her scalp hidden beneath healthy hair. The shadows had left her eyes, replaced by something Jessica hadn't seen in years: hope. Jennifer was dating now, a nurse named Marcus from the hospital where she'd started working as a medical records clerk. He was kind, patient, and treated Jessica like she was made of gold. He taught her card tricks and brought her books and never, ever raised his voice. But it was Sunday, which meant Uncle Derek was coming. The knock came at exactly 6 o'clock, because Uncle Derek was always exactly on time. Jessica ran to the door, Jennifer following with a smile. Derek stood in the hallway holding 2 pizza boxes and wearing one of his expensive suits that Jessica had learned meant he'd come straight from work. His face, which other people said was scary, softened the moment he saw her. There's my favorite astronaut, he said. Uncle Derek. Jessica hugged him around the waist, and he ruffled her hair with his free hand. They ate pizza at the kitchen table while Jessica talked about school, about the science project she was doing on the solar system, about the new girl in class who didn't have many friends yet, so Jessica had invited her to sit at lunch. That was kind of you, Derek said quietly. You said being strong means being kind even when it's hard. Derek's eyes met Jennifer's across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, understanding, the acknowledgement that this man, this dangerous, complicated man, had saved more than their lives that night. After dinner, they played chess. Derek was teaching Jessica strategy, patience, thinking 3 moves ahead. She was getting better, had even won twice last month. Uncle Derek, Jessica said, moving her knight, can I ask you something? Always. Why did that bad man hurt my MaMa? The question was asked with the directness of children who haven't yet learned to avoid uncomfortable truths. Derek took a slow breath, considering his words carefully. Some people are broken inside and they hurt others because they don't know how to fix themselves. It doesn't make it right, but understanding why can help us heal. Jessica nodded, studying the chessboard, then without looking up, are you broken inside? The question hit Derek like a bullet to the chest. Jennifer's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. I was, Derek said finally, his voice rough, for a long time, but you and your MaMa are helping me fix it. Jessica looked up, her eyes, so much like Sophia's, searching his face. Then she abandoned the chessboard and threw her arms around his neck. Good, because we need you. Derek held her, this child who'd accidentally called the wrong number, and felt something in his chest that had been frozen for 20 years finally thaw completely. Later, after Jessica was in bed and Jennifer had thanked him for the 100th time, Derek drove back to his penthouse. His empire hadn't disappeared. He still controlled territory, still made decisions that affected lives, still operated in shadows that most people pretended didn't exist. But things had changed. Derek Castellano's organization now funded Massachusetts' largest domestic violence shelter. He'd established a youth mentorship program that pulled at-risk kids off the streets and gave them alternatives. Word had spread through Boston's underworld. Anyone who harmed women or children in his territory would answer to him personally. 3 men had tested that rule. None were ever seen again. Brown had vanished the night Derek let him walk away. Some said he'd fled to Florida. Others whispered he'd never made it out of Boston at all. Derek never confirmed or denied anything. The mystery itself served as warning. Late at night, Derek sat at his desk in his penthouse office, the city lights of Boston spreading below like fallen stars. On his desk sat 2 framed photographs. The first, Sophia at 7, gap-toothed smile, curly light brown hair catching sunlight, eyes full of a joy that had been stolen too soon. The second, Jessica at 8, hugging Derek at her school's science fair, her project on constellations earning first place, her smile bright with the confidence of a child who knew she was loved and protected. Derek traced Sophia's face with one finger, the glass cool beneath his touch. "I kept my promise, Soph," he whispered to the empty room. "It took me 20 years, but I kept it." He closed his eyes and imagined her voice, clear as bells, full of the forgiveness and pride he'd never allowed himself to believe he deserved. "I know, Danny, I'm proud of you." Derek Castellano, Daniel Torres, opened his eyes and for the first time in 2 decades, felt something he'd thought lost forever. Peace. Jessica Martinez graduated top of her class and earned a full scholarship to MIT, where she's pursuing a degree in aerospace engineering. She calls Uncle Derek every Sunday. Jennifer Martinez completed her nursing degree and now works as a hospital administrator, advocating for domestic violence survivors and developing protocols to protect vulnerable patients. Derek Castellano's organization continues to operate in Boston's shadows, but now includes the state's largest privately funded domestic violence shelter, a youth mentorship program that has helped over 300 at-risk children, and a network that quietly protects those whom the system fails. Brown was never seen again. Sometimes a wrong number is exactly the right call. Sometimes redemption comes wearing an expensive suit and carrying the weight of a promise made to a little girl who believed in heroes. And sometimes the darkest souls find their way back to the light, one saved child at a time. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove even the most broken hearts can heal when given the chance to protect something precious.